Hello and welcome to CGS Video Interviews. This is Paul Harris, your host, and I'm joined today by Jason Stirbinskis, Managing Director of Los Cerros, an Australian gold junior. Good morning or good evening, should I say, Jason. How are you?
I'm well, Paul. Good morning to you.
Thank you. You've just put out another great hole from the Tesorito target at your Miraflores deposit here in Colombia in Risaralda. 582 meters at 0.94 grams per ton gold. Congratulations, an amazing result. But before we talk specifically about that, maybe we can start with a little bit of background from the sort of Tesorito drilling campaign, which I believe started in the second half of last year.
Yeah, that's right. The tipping point or the step change in the company occurred in September of last year when we drilled hole 8. So there were 7 historical holes at Tesorito, and 2 of those were particularly interesting. And I'll talk about those in a minute if you like. But we drilled hole 8 at Tesorito, and that delivered 230 meters at a gram per ton from surface. But that hole back in September, that allowed people, because of the orientations of the previous drill holes, particularly 2 and 7 in relation to 8, allowed people to potentially calculate a volume. And it didn't take very long, like a few hours after we released the announcement, for people to work out that just based on the drilling that we had at that point, we had something significant at Tesorito South. And it essentially took Tesorito from a target to a legitimate porphyry discovery. And that confidence from that drill result allowed us to raise significant funds later on in the year. And I think I mentioned this at your gold symposium in November of last year. So we raised money about $10 million late last year on the back of hole 8 being the catalyst, and we actually got 4 times that in terms of offers. So it was heavily oversubscribed, but we took $10 million at that raising, and we've still got the lion's share of that now. But that gave us some comfort and allowed us to commit to having 3 drill rigs running continuously. 2 of those focused at Tesorito and 1 at Chuscal. And that, of course, has generated some significant results since then. You mentioned hole 16 that we released earlier this week, which is a spectacular hole, as you mentioned. Those sorts of intercepts don't come very often in a person's career, but absolutely brilliant result. But in January, we released hole 14, and that was, at the time, the best hole. It was trumped by hole 16, but hole 14 was 320 meters at 1.5 grams per ton from surface. So, high grade in porphyry language, a gram per ton is considered high grade, and here we are hitting 320 meters at 1.5 gram per ton from surface. That still today ranks as the 5th best drill result on the ASX for anywhere in the world. So it's a very, very special result, and I'm sure hole 16, once the new rankings come out, will be above that. So it's been going great. We've got 7 holes so far of over 200 meters, grading around about a gram per ton. Some of those are slightly under. 2 of those are under. The rest are a gram per ton or better. So 7 holes over 200 meters from surface, grading a gram per ton. As I said, 1 of those grading 1.5 grams per ton for 320 meters. So it's looking really encouraging.
Well, thank you, Jason. Now, in terms of 2021, you're fully funded at the moment. So what are the sort of drilling aims at Tesorito? You said, the initial holes enabled people to start doing their own back-of-the-envelope calculations. You've put in more holes, had more success. So what are the aims of the drilling for this year? And I assume you're sort of, at some point in the future, you're looking at putting your own official initial resource calculation on Tesorito. What's the plan there?
Yeah, well, as I said, we've got 2 rigs there, so we're generating a fair bit of drill information. In fact, I think we're up to hole 22 now, so it won't take many more holes before we start to give serious consideration to doing an initial resource calculation there. I think it's more likely the back end of the year, so late Q3, Q4, we'll look at going into a resource type calculation for Tesorito South. But the other point that I'd like to raise, again from hole 16 that we announced earlier in the week, is that hole, and the reason for that incredibly long drill intercept is we actually went out of Tesorito South as we know it. We know the geometry of Tesorito South down to about 350 meters, 400 meters or so. It's kind of defined by various structures at that depth. So we know that sort of geometry and shape. But this went well beyond that, went for several hundred meters of mineralization beyond that. And the reason for that, or the source of that, is actually going deep past Tesorito South as we know it and into a new porphyry suite. So we hit a magmatic breccia with porphyry representation in that breccia, and then went through some porphyritic diorites at sort of 500 meters downhole for about 100 meters. So whilst we're looking at the sort of resource drill out of Tesorito South, we also have this new exciting, you could almost look at it as a new discovery at depth to the west of Tesorito South that we need to develop as well. So yes, resource drilling, but there's also plenty more exploration drilling to happen at Tesorito.
And I suppose in the broader picture, that starts giving you some sort of luxury problems because you've already got a deposit and a reserve at Miraflores. You've got Chuscales, Dos Quebradas. So you've got a sort of a string of porphyry deposits. You're also starting to think about development options. Obviously, as I say, you've got a reserve and PFS, I believe. Is it PFS on Miraflores? So, the bigger picture is starting to get, well, even bigger, even fuller.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got 1.5 million ounces of resource so far in the Quinchilla project. And I say Quinchilla, which is sort of the Miraflores, Tesorito, Chuscal, Dos Quebradas, Santa Sofia. They're all within about 3 kilometres of each other. So we call the project Quinchilla. And as you mentioned, Miraflores is the DFS going through final stages of approval there. So yes, we are developing Miraflores and going through those final stages of approval. That gives us the optionality to look at a potential production scenario anchored to the DFS at Miraflores. But just 800 meters away from that is Tesorito South, and a little further to Tesorito North. And 2 kilometers away is Chuscal, earlier stage than Tesorito, but lots of promise there as well. So we have the optionality of looking at a modest scale production as defined in the DFS for Miraflores, but also looking at these bigger opportunities that present themselves in the Tesorito porphyry and in the potential porphyry target at Chuscal as well. And if those things progress as they are, and they're looking spectacular, especially Tesorito, Miraflores really is becoming almost a distraction, and the real stories in these porphyries and how that may interplay with a DFS or a production scenario based at Miraflores.
Okay, drilling porphyries, long holes, as you say, hole 16, almost 600 meters of about a gram a ton of gold. Drilling those out is going to be expensive. It's going to take time, which are typically things that a junior explorer doesn't have. How does that influence or impact your strategy going forward? Do you start looking for a partner? Big porphyries become interesting to bigger companies, of course.
Absolutely, Paul. We are in a very enviable position at the moment that we've got lots of funds in the bank. So at the moment, we don't need to look for significant funding from anyone. We can continue to develop this thing under our own speed, and we're doing that at pace with the 2 drill rigs there. So we're the lion's share of the way through understanding what the first 350, 400 meters looks like. But as you point out, and rightly so, that a porphyry development scenario, you're not talking $100 million capex projects. You're talking about $1 billion capex project. Just look at projects like Buritica in the north of where we are, or Gramalote or Nueva Chiquiro. These multi-million ounce, 10 million plus type projects. That's quite an ambition for a junior to try and embrace without having someone with a much stronger balance sheet to support them. So yes, if we go down that path and it's getting that sort of traction, then we'll need to look at some sort of support in that way, a cornerstone coming in from a production house or a big fund backing us and supporting us. That's the way, I think, to de-risk a project like this for a junior. I've seen many juniors try and grapple the mass of a porphyry, the sheer size of a porphyry, and go under without getting that support around them. So we'll certainly be looking for that sort of activity as we go forward.
It would seem to be a sort of good time to be in that position. The middle Cauca belt in Colombia, which is where the Quinchilla project is, that's starting to attract a lot more attention in recent months. We've seen Gran Colombia Gold spin out its Marmato project first into Caldas Gold, and that's subsequently acquired by Aris Gold. And just next door to them at Guayabales, Collective Mining has set up. So the Middle Cauca Belt seems to be sort of coming back into favor, increasing interest in there. So that must bode well for your plans going forward.
It absolutely does. Yeah, with all the success of our neighbours, it certainly draws attention to what we've got as well. So I'm sure that helps all of us. Every company that's active in the Mid-Cauca benefits from the success of the others in the Mid-Cauca. So good luck to them, and we hope to follow their path.
Okay, we're planning on holding the Colombia Gold Symposium again in November this year. Hopefully, it'll be a physical event, and Jason, you've already kindly agreed to present and give us an update. So, when November comes around, what kind of catalyst can we expect Los Cerros to have achieved in the intervening months?
Yeah, it's all about drilling. That's the main story. We've got 3 drill rigs running. We've focused a lot in this conversation about Tesorito and the rigs we've got going there and building the Tesorito South story. We've got Tesorito North, which we drilled 1 hole in early or mid to 2020, I think it was, and that delivered 200 plus meters at half a gram per ton or something like that. So there's certainly something up there that we need to go back and pursue. So there's this opportunity there. Just last week, last Monday, I think it was, we announced a new discovery, a new target, called Cibal, just 1 kilometer southwest of Tesorito. It looks almost like Tesorito in terms of its lithology and its structural settings. So we look forward to drilling that as well. Of course, we've got Chuscal, and we're actively drilling there. We hope to get back to Miraflores. Earlier last year, we did some geological modeling at Miraflores, and we found in the geological model that there were zones of what we suspect is mineralization that's outside the resource envelope. So we'd like to go back and drill some holes at Miraflores and potentially incrementally increase the resource at Miraflores. And then also we have Santa Sofia in the north of Quinchia that we want to pursue. And then we have the greenfield at Andes. So drilling, and more drilling. We'll also be progressing the early stage targets with geophysics and soil sampling and channel samples and those sorts of things from time to time. And we'll announce those as we move through, just like we did with Cibal last week. So main story is all about the drilling. On top of that, we have said to the market that we're in the final stages of submissions for mining approvals at Miraflores. So we'd see that come to a head later in the year as well with those final submissions. And that's bound to be interesting development as well. And then the third aspect is, as we hinted earlier, perhaps falling into a resource calculation at Tesorito South later in the year as well. So plenty of news flow, most of it drilling, but certainly not all drilling.
Well, drilling's what you want to hear an exploration company doing. So it sounds like you're going to have a very busy year. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I look forward to seeing you in November and hearing firsthand about the progress this year. So that's all we have time for today. Join us for more CGS videos on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thanks, Paul, and see you in November.